Hello and welcome back to my course. Today we'll create a simple example for our template-driven forms using directives as its validators. And starting that, I already created a Angular project wherein I don't need to create a new component because I'm just gonna basically use the app component.html and here in app.component.css and also the TS file. So basically, I'm just gonna keep it simple and make it less complicated because forms is not really that complicated as long as you understand how it works and how it is used. To start off, basically, I also already installed the Bootstrap um, in this project. So as you can see in my angular.json, I already have this script in my angular.json file. And also in the style.css, I basically imported it already so that I don't need to import it again while doing the project. So let's start. In our app.component.html, we're going to create a div with a class of card and with a style of with um, okay, let's save that first, and then width of 50 rem and width of 50 rem and margin at top of 20 VH. First, let's access the server first because I already run the server. Okay, so there is the server. Um, as you can see, the card is showing already because we use a Bootstrap import and installation already. And then afterwards, after creating the div for the card, we'll basically create a header tag for the title of this example. Let's say it's just gonna be template driven. So after creating that, we're gonna basically change this to h5, not h1. It's very big if that's the case. And then we're gonna add a class on it as a bootstrap class for the card header. Oh, sorry, I'm on caps lock. I'm gonna remove the caps lock first, and then let's add a bootstrap class called card header, wherein we also will add text center so that it will center this title or text. And then after that, we're gonna create another div for the card body dot card body, save it, and we're gonna create another h5 tag with a title of or name of validation with directives. And then we're also gonna add a bootstrap class called card title, wherein we're also gonna center the text. So then after creating this div, we're gonna create a form, okay, and then save it. And then after that, we're gonna create a div again and then add a bootstrap class on it called form group. Okay, then after this, we basically still need to import the forms module in here so that it's gonna work perfectly fine without any errors. So going to our app module.ts, we're gonna import here the forms module, and then you just need to click enter, then you save it. Then in your imports array for the app.module.ts, we're just gonna basically add the forms module in here. Okay, and then we just need to save it. Then after editing our app module.ts, we're gonna go back, then create a label, sorry, for name. Then it's gonna be name. This is basically the label for our input. So we're gonna create the input with a class of form control. This is also still a Bootstrap class with that type of text. And then ID of name, and name is also equivalent to name. And then we're just gonna basically use the ng model directive in this one, equivalent to the variable name, and that let's make it required. Okay, so as you can see, we're experiencing some error because of this variable name. So let's go to our app.component.ts and create a variable called name with a type of any. Then now it's fixed, and then going back to our HTML file, basically this required is already a validator or a required validator here in Angular that tells us that this input tag or input field is basically needed, or the user is necessary to input something in here, the name, before it proceeds to the next part of it. And then, but this required attribute still won't show any error handling, or maybe some alerts for the user that he forgot to insert a name, but we'll add that later. And after that, after creating the input, under our div, we'll create a button. This button is basically gonna make this data submit or um or show the data on our console for this example. So let's just put a submit button on it. And then to make it look prettier, we're gonna add a class called button dash primary, the margin at top for 3. Okay, now it's looking prettier. Then we will add a method in here, click, and then let's create a method called on submit. Okay, and then going back to our app.component.ts, we will create a method there for the on submit. So in here, on submit, we're gonna basically this dot name. We're just gonna basically print the name that the user input in here. So going back to our app.component.html, after creating the button, we will now create a validation using the directive ng if. This basically tells the Angular or the system that this ngIf directive will output or will give out a p tag that will tell the user that there is no name entered. Then we save it. Okay, now the validation is there. We just need to make it look much better. And then we'll add a class, bootstrap class for margin top of 2. Okay, and style of color red so that it's gonna be much more noticeable. Then after that, we are gonna add another div to tell the user that if there is a name, if he or she or the user inserted a name, it's gonna be basically display the exact name that the user inputted. So let's create a p tag with name, and then let's interpolate the variable name in our TypeScript file. Okay, so now our HTML document is fixed. Let's just add more CSS to make it to make this card go in the center. So So let's create a CSS for our container wherein it's going to be displayed flex align content to center and justify items center. Maybe this is item, sorry. Okay, and then in our app.component.html, we're gonna contain this HTML code. So what we're going to do is I'm gonna cut this and then I'm gonna create a div with a class of container and then paste it and save it. Now, as you can see, our card is in the center already. And for the validations, basically it's automatically sending or giving a hint in the user that there is still no name that's been entered because the ngF is not detecting this. Instead, it's detecting this um, line of code. So basically, the value for the ngF is still telling the Angular that there is still a null value for the variable name. So it will display this p tag and tell the user that there's still no name entered. Wherein if we enter something in here, let's say um, John Doe. Let's say John Doe. So basically, it's not displaying this line of code anymore. It's basically displaying this line of code because the variable name has a value on it, and the ngIf will only display this line of code if there is a value for the variable name. This is basically how simple it is to create a template-driven validation using directives. There are still more directives that you can use, and maybe it's gonna fit into a proper situation wherein you don't need the reactive forms module. You just need to create a simple validations, and maybe it will help you lessen the burden or be efficient in doing a production level code. And then for our submit button, basically as of the moment, the submit button is not showing something in the console, is showing the name, the value of this input in our console.log. But if we remove this, it's basically not going to show anything. So here in our app.component.ts, what we're going to do is we will create a simple if-else statement. So let's say if this dot name is equivalent to null, console.log null, else. Then let's just add else, and we just put back the code that we did earlier. So as you can see, if I submit this, it's gonna basically return the value of null or show us the value of null here in our console. I can change this. I might put no name entered. And I save that, and then I can submit it, and it's just gonna basically return null. But the much better version for this, it's gonna be much more user friendly. What we have to do in here is we just need to remove this if else statement. So instead of adding a if else statement, we'll just add a alert that will tell the user that you have entered plus the value of this dot name. So as you can see, if I click the submit button, it's just gonna give me the undefined or the null value for the input. And then if I press OK and then just add John Doe and then submit it, it's gonna basically tell the user that you have entered John Doe as the name. So in a template-driven forms, it's just basically directives. It just runs around directives, some basic algorithms and logic, but there's still plenty of ways on how to do a template-driven directives. But for complex level of validation, you need to use the reactive modules in Angular, which will help you in plenty of ways. For the next video, I will show you how does the reactive module works, and see you in the next video.